Hi everyone, welcome to the new tester training for Invedyn. This is just a very short introduction to the tests that we do and to some of the concepts that are similar across all of them. You'll be receiving specific training for each type of test that we do later on. So to start off, I want to talk a little bit about our test procedures at Invedyn. Each type of test will be slightly different. A translation test will be done a little bit differently than a speaking test, for example, but there are some general areas or stages that are similar between all of them. So we start with a pre-testing phase. And in this phase, it's not really that formal. It's sort of chatting with the applicant to try to get them more comfortable, help them if they're a little nervous. Also, if the test is over Skype, to make sure that the connection is good, that the camera is working, and that the recording software is working. During this time, you can chat about any unimportant topic. Try not to ask them anything that would be personal or that they might object to, not, religion or family or that kind of thing. After you've finished and you're ready to start the main test to ask the actual questions, that's what we call the testing phase. During this phase, you'll be, in most tests, you'll be asking a series of questions and listening to the answers. In some, you'll be giving them a series of written prompts and then either listening to them describe them or answer questions or translate them. But the testing phase itself, there is a testing phase in every test. And they all also finish with a wrap-up. The wrap-up is very short. You basically are just confirming that everything worked, that you have the recording and that it's okay. You're thanking them for their time and answering any questions they have about the actual procedures of the test. When they'll be notified about their score and that sort of thing. A lot of applicants will try to ask the tester how they did, or if they did well enough or something, and please do not answer those kind of questions during the wrap-up. Let that information come from the official authorities, because you might be in a situation where during the test you feel okay, but going back you review it, you decide to change either up or down your score, and you don't want to get into a situation where the applicant believes you've told them the official result before they actually get the official result. So really the assessment that we're doing is based on the pre-test phase and the test phase. It's almost entirely the test phase, really. But the pre-testing phase, you are allowed to take into account what they do with the language during that stage. If you get a case where somebody is very borderline between a pass and a fail, but during the pre-test phase they did a very good job and were very clear and very high level with the language, you are allowed to take that into account and decide to pass them. Or during the pre-test phase, if they were very poor, you're allowed to take that into account as well. Please don't take anything in the wrap-up into account when you're creating the score. And as I said, the score will come from the assessment, and the scores that we use at Invedyn are based on this Interagency Language Roundtable called the ILR scale. You can see it at gov.ilr.org. It's basically an American group put together by the U.S. Federal government, and it's an attempt to standardize their scoring and their levels across the entire government, across all the different agencies. And it's the one that we use because it's the biggest one in the U.S. If you're familiar with the Common European Framework of Reference, the CEFR, that's very similar to ILR. It's just that's the European version and ILR is the American version. The ILR goes from 0, which is absolutely no language skill. For example, my Swahili level is 0, up to level 5, which is somebody similar to a very educated, very articulate native speaker. There are very few level 5s in the world. You'll probably never meet one. I think I've met one in my life. Level 3 is it's where most of the customers want us to test. Level 3 is basically able to get along in the language, and well, we'll describe it later on, and you'll see more as you get into each type of rubric. But most of the tests that we do at Invedyn are level 3, meaning if they pass, then they're level 3 or maybe higher. If they fail the level 3 test, it means they could be a level 2, could be level 1. They might be 0, but that's pretty rare. For individual questions, you'll be looking at the level of performance for that question. So for example, if this blue dot was the performance level, then this particular person has scored a 3. Okay, because in order to score 3, you have to be above the line for level 3. Of course, we ask more than one question, and so a typical test might look more like this. And this is actually a very easy test to score. This is very clearly also a level 3. Everything is above the line for level 3, but it's within the range of 3 to 4, so it's level 3. This is a very beautiful and clean test. This one's very easy to score, but sometimes we'll get tests that are more like this. Now this one, it's tempting to say that this person would be level 2 because most of the things are here. But the way the ILR scale works, if you have anything below level 2 or any level, you cannot get that score. Okay, so this person has one dot that is below level 2 and one that is basically right at level 2. So this person cannot be a level 2. Let me just repeat that. In order for this person to get a score of 2, all of the dots must be over the line for level 2. Well, alright, so technically this person is a level 1, alright, because all of the dots are over the line for level 1. But this isn't, level 1 is not a very good description of this person. This person is much better than most level 1s. So we have a special case in ILR. Somebody who is mostly a level 2, but just a couple items are below the line, we can call a 1+. And the same, if somebody is mostly level 3, with just 1 or 2 items that are fails for level 3, we would call them a 2+. It's called 1+. I prefer to think of it almost like a 2-, because it's mostly 2. Sometimes you'll get scores that are very different. They'll have big ranges. This person might be very good at talking about some topics and very weak about others, and so on. And for this case, 2 really is the best answer here. Okay, because they are mostly 2. They have a few things that are up in 3, but they don't warrant a 2+. Because remember, a 2+ means they are mostly 3 with just a couple items below, and that doesn't really describe this person. So this person is a level 2. Well, alright. The way that we generate this number of data points at Invedyn is, for most tests, we ask 3 questions, and then we assess each question on 3 elements, which gives us a total of 9 assessments. Okay, you can put them in a grid like this if you think. Each row would be a question, each column would be a different element, and then we can think of it as pass or fail for the question. So for example, if this is a level 3 test, if they get everything correct, they meet level 3. So they get 9 check marks, level 3. So again, all 3 questions have all 3 elements are all passes. So they get 9 check marks, they can be level 3, assuming this is a level 3 test. If it's a level 2 test, this would be a 2, obviously. If they get most of them, then they would get a 2+. Right? And if they don't get most of them, they would be a 2. If they get nothing, well, we can't really score that. We don't really know. So we give them a score of 0, but they might actually be a 1 or something. We're not sure. This might be the easier way to look at this. If they have, again, if they have 0 correct or 0 passes, we give them a 0. If they have 1 to 4, we give them a 2. Again, assuming this is a level 3 test. If they have 5 to 8, we give them a 2+. And if they get everything right, we give them a 3. Now again, most of our tests are level 3 tests, So this is the numbers that I've given you here. And most of the scores are going to be 3 or 2 plus. It's a little more rare for us to give out a 2, and it's very rare for us to give out a 0. Just because people don't send employees or prospective employees to us for testing unless they think they're going to pass. I mean, there's no point in paying us to test someone who has no chance. All right. If you have questions about this, you can feel free to contact us and we'll walk you through it again. This will also make a little more sense once you do the individual test type training. All right, so I want to talk about some of the challenges of being a tester. And these are not just challenges that Invedyn faces, these are challenges for any type of language tester. And the first one is this thing, it's called inter-assessor validity. So inter is between, assessor is the people giving the test, and validity is how valid or how true or how consistent the scores are. This picture is an example of very bad inter-assessor validity. We've got 2 people who are giving 10s and 2 people who are giving very low scores. So this is a big problem in language testing. If you've got 6 people who are testing Urdu and they all listen to the same candidate, they should all give very similar scores. So we want a situation more like this. It's okay if it's not exactly the same between everyone. We'll probably never achieve perfect inter-assessor validity, but we want it to be very close as we can get it. And so again, if we've got 6 different Urdu testers, if we show them all the same test, they should generally agree on whether it's a pass or a fail. They might be different a little bit about why it's a pass or how strong they are or why it's a fail or how weak they are, but they should hopefully agree as to whether or not it's a pass or a fail. The way that we do that is with something called norming sessions. Norming here is becoming normal or getting everyone to agree in the middle ground. This is a picture of a norming session that is in person. Norming sessions are normally done in person, but you can also do them online. Invedyn certainly encourages people to go and do them in person if you happen to live near the other testers in your language. That's a wonderful thing. We also try to provide you the tools to do it online, which that's really most of what happens. In either case, you would get together, again, either in person or online, and you would share a bunch of files or videos and just discuss what grade you would give them and why. And over time, you would become a little more synced up or a little bit more normed, and you would hopefully improve your inter-assessor validity. All right, so that's really the last of the big concerns for testers, to make sure you understand the grid that we use with the 9 different questions, pass or fail, and what scores we give. But we'll also be asking most of you to help us write test questions. And that has a different set of concerns or difficult areas. And I just want to cover 2 of them very quickly here. So to best understand how to write these language questions, language test questions, I want you to think about this situation. Imagine I own all this land in this picture, and I've been growing these trees here, and now I want to start cutting them down and selling the wood. But small trees are not worth very much money, so I don't want to sell small trees. So what I need to know is, how big are these trees? And I've done the math, and I've decided that if most of the trees are more than 10 meters high, it's worth my time to go and cut them and sell them. But if most of the trees are not over 10 meters high, it's not worth it. So I hire you. And I say, hey, could you come and tell me what's the average height of these trees? Well, how are you going to do that? That's a very similar question to trying to assess somebody's language abilities. I know it seems very different, but stay with me. I'll explain the difference. Well, some people will go in and will start trying to measure what they can easily measure. right? The person on the left here is measuring the diameter of the trees after he cut them down. So definitely that's not going to work. The person on the right here, she's measuring the circumference of the tree. Okay, that might be interesting data, but it's not what I need to know. Right? I asked them both to measure the height of the trees. And so both of these are examples of poor construct validity. Construct validity is basically finding out if you're measuring the thing that you're supposed to be measuring. Both of those people have poor construct validity because neither of them are measuring the height of the trees, and that's what the customer wanted. Now, how does that apply to language testing? Well, when you're testing language, you have to be sure that you're measuring the correct thing. It's very easy to make a test of, say, interpretation, but to build questions that are actually measuring speaking ability. Or it's very easy to make a test for translation and to write questions that are actually measuring grammar ability or vocab knowledge. So we have to be very careful as we write questions that the thing we're measuring is the correct thing. That if it's an interpretation test, we're actually measuring people's ability to interpret. If it's a speaking test, we're actually measuring their speaking ability. Or, in this case, if we're measuring the height of trees, we have to be sure that we're actually measuring the height of the trees. This is construct validity. The construct here is, how did you build your questions, like construction. All right, but there's one other kind of validity that we have to be careful about, especially in language testing. So let's go back to our tree example. Let's say you find out a good way to measure the height of the trees. However you're going to do that, I don't know. But obviously you can't go and measure the height of all of those trees. There's too many of them. It'll take you much too long. So most people will go in and measure a few of them, and then you do some math and you find out what the average is. This is a sample. And the same thing happens in language testing. If I want to know somebody's ability to translate, let's say translate French to English, I can't test them on every word in French or every sentence in French or every type of document in French. Right? I can't, that's way too big. It takes way too long. So I need to make a sample. I need to think of a few questions that will help me understand their general ability to translate French to English. But you have to be careful. There's a thing called sample validity. If you look at the picture here, imagine this is my sample of trees. I've chosen 5 trees, which already is a small sample, but for some reason I've chosen all the tallest trees. Now this means my sample is not going to be a good representation of the rest of the forest. And the same is true with language testing. We have to be careful that the sample we choose, which is the questions we choose, are a good representation of the real world. So again, if you have a translation test for French to English, if all of the documents I'm asking somebody to translate are, let's say, medical documents, that's not what we call good sample validity, because it's going to give an unfair advantage to somebody with medical training, and it's going to harm everyone else. So we have to be careful that the questions we write in language tests come from normal, everyday sorts of topics, and that they're not too specialized. We also have to be careful that they're not all the same topic. You'll see a trend or an easy mistake for people is to write a lot about the same topic. If it's the test of Dari, they'll start writing a lot of questions about countries in which Dari is spoken. And you just have to be careful that we have a good range of everyday topics, and that's what we call sample validity. All right, let's just review quickly. This is our assessment levels. Remember that we usually ask 3 questions, and we judge each question with 3 different ways, which gives us a total of 9 assessments. Those assessments can be pass or fail. If they get 9 pass marks, if it's a level 3 test, then they get level 3. If it's a level 2 test, they get level 2, and so on. If they get most of them right, but not all of them, they would go down and get a plus. So if it's a level 3 test, they would get a 2 plus. Because again, they're mostly 3, but not entirely. So 2 plus. If they don't get most, they're a 2. And if they get 0, then they're 0. Inter-assessor validity is the primary problem for testers. It's the big thing that they should worry about. And again, it's just making sure that if we show the same test to all of our testers, we'll get basically the same score back, the same pass or the same fail. It's okay to have a little bit of difference as to why they passed or why they failed, but we're really hoping everyone will agree if it's a pass or a fail. Construct validity. This one is making sure that the tests or the questions on the test are measuring the thing that you actually want to measure. So be careful not to write a speaking question that is measuring grammar ability. Sample validity is being sure that the topics on the test are everyday topics, not too specialized, and also that there's a variety of them, that they're not all the same topic. Alright, that's just the very, very quick introduction. You will have more trainings for each type of test, speaking, translation, interpretation, and so on. This was really just meant to be an overview of the whole process that we go through at Invedyn. And obviously, if you have questions, please feel free to ask myself or anyone. And we will be sending you information about your specific training for the types of tests that you'll be delivering and probably writing questions for very soon. All right. Thank you for your time, and we'll be in contact soon. Bye-bye.